And I say via.
Welcome, everybody. This is the Baha'i Adult Learning Online session on May 17th, 2020. We have a special speaker with us today, Mr. George Villa, Dr. George Villa Esquire from Jupiter, Florida. He is going to be speaking with us on a very, very formidable topic, Time Prophecies and the Baha'i Faith. And this time prophecies that we're talking about will be sourcing from the Bible and the Quran. Now, I know a lot of people are familiar with the Bible or familiar with the Quran, but you might not be familiar with these special topics, which Mr. Villa has taken a lot of time at great lengths to put together in this presentation so you can view today. If I can allow, Mr. Villa, can you please introduce yourself and get this show on the road?
Thank you, John. And first of all, let me say how happy and excited I am to be back with the Clearwater Baha'is. I lived there for several years in the past decade. I really enjoyed my time there. And many thanks to my dear friend Gilbert for all his efforts to pull these events off. Hello, everybody. My name is George. Actually, I say Via. Everybody else in the world says Via, so I could be wrong. But I'm very happy to be here. My wife and I, we bring you glad tidings. We were just in Israel a few months ago, back in October. And last month we were in Bahrain. But when we were in Israel, we were walking through the streets of Haifa. I brought my favorite dress shoes. And I just left our hotel, and I got like 20 feet away, and my shoes fell apart. Tops came off the bottom, and I looked down, and I realized that the Lord had taken my soles. Can you believe it? Both of them. So I'll pause for the laughter, and so John, tell me how you want me to get started.
So we just get started from here. We continue with the presentation, and more importantly, as people have their questions through this presentation, there is a chat box on GoToMeeting. Now, a lot of people who are joining us, they may have encountered issues with Zoom. Zoom has had issues in Great Britain. A lot of people having presentations or meetings, they're going to Google or they're going to GoToMeeting and other apps. This is an application that has yet to have issues, but we have a chat bar that is in your GoToMeeting control panel. This is the GoToMeeting application. This is separate from Zoom, so it works differently. We have in the chat panel the option where you can type. So we have Miss Judith Langhorst from the Netherlands who has said hello. And you can see in this control panel questions that are sent to the organizers, questions to the presenter. Please, when you have questions, make your questions to the organizers, and we will be also presenting those questions to Mr. Vaya when he has the time to, after he finishes his point, to ask or answer questions. So how's that? Is that explanatory?
Sounds good. I have some access to the chat screen, but it's over here, so I'm not always going to be able to look at it. Just want to let everybody know, I welcome you to this talk on what I call time prophecies from the Bible and the Quran that foretell the Baha'i Faith. My name is George Vaya. I am a member of the Baha'i Faith and have been for 30-some years now, 33, 1986, going on 34, which means I'm just getting older. I don't like to think I'm getting older. I'm getting closer to my goal. I like to think God has a purpose for us, that God keeps his promises, and one of the greatest promises of all time in living human, not more than living human history, but in the last 2,000 years, is the promise of Christ that he would return. And he was so well treated when he was here his first time. I hope we treat him better this time. We're going to be looking at, hold on, my computer, please. We're going to be looking at, there we go. These are predictions of the great messengers of God. Right. Every time I'm technical. All right, so I'm not going to be able to look at myself. And these great messengers of God, we call the Bab and Baha'u'llah. We will be introducing the Bab, which is an Arabic title that means the gate. His name was Sayyid Ali Muhammad, and Sayyid is a title that means descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, and Baha'u'llah is also a title that means the glory of God. The Bab means the gate, and Baha'u'llah was born Mirza Hussein Ali, both of them born in Iran, of all places. So, we're going to be talking about God according to this timeline. There's a timeline. We're going to get to the timeline in a minute. But before I want to talk about God, I want to make sure we're on the same page and we're talking about the same thing. Some people's belief in God differs from other people's, and that's entirely proper because we're all different people and we all have different experiences. But I like to ask questions that are help make the point, and questions that are kind of simple and easy to answer. Because when connecting with God, it shouldn't be rocket science. It should be pretty easy. So my first question is this: how do we know about God? And I'll give you some suggestions here. Is it because parents taught us? We learned something in Sunday school when we were paying attention. We actually studied some class in college, whatever, about different religions. We watched the 10 Commandments. That's always a good learning experience. Or we had a vision, or is it none of the above? Not sure if anybody's had a vision, or if anybody that had a vision would actually admit to it. But in reality, we know about God because God tells us about himself. And isn't it nice that God tells us about himself? First, he creates us, then he gives us a huge universe to explore and ponder. And then he tells us about himself. He gives us life, something to be thankful for. Is it that difficult to say thank you, God, every breath that you take? And the vehicle that God uses to tell us about himself is that he raises up a prophet among us, or a messenger, and they bring us God's guidance. This is the vehicle that God uses. Now, am I on the screen, John? Is my
Yes.
camera available?
You're on the screen. Everyone
Okay.
can see you just fine. Yes.
Okay, good. So, God is something we can never know by his design. But when he talks to us, he will raise up a prophet among us who looks like one of us, but who talks like God. And God speaks through them. So this is the way that we can attain the presence of God, is to attain the presence of his messengers and his prophets. And so it's like an intermediary, someone who comes between God and us and gives us God's message. But it's always God's message. It's God speaking through them. And isn't that great? Isn't that nice of God to do that? And whenever he sends a prophet, we always listen to God's prophets now, don't we? We treat them with respect and welcome them with open arms, right? This is where I'd like to hear some response from the audience, but because of our technology, you have to just sort of take this internally, like an introvert. So now, here's that timeline again. We're going to get to that timeline, don't worry. The first thing I want to do is ask the question what is a prophet? What does the prophet do? Does he just walk among us and we don't listen to him and nothing changes? Actually, a prophet, speaks the word of God, and in simplest terms, he foretells future events. That's why he's called a prophet. He prophesies about future events. In the Bible, there's a great day being foretold, or a great redeemer, the appearance of a great redeemer. What is the great day that's being foretold? Some have called it the day of God, the day of God himself, the day of resurrection, the day of judgment. And they've also called it the coming of the kingdom of God on earth. That what we're doing while we listen to all these prophets is that we're preparing for the day where we will build the kingdom of God on earth. We can't do that by ourselves. We can't even build a kingdom, of humans on earth without going to war every 5 minutes. And we need this great redeemer. Daniel referred to this great redeemer as Michael the Great Prince, as the Ancient of Days. He had many more names for them. Isaiah called him the Everlasting Father, the Almighty, the Mighty God, the Prince of Peace. Jesus referred to himself upon his return as the Spirit of Truth. All things have been manifested through the power of truth. It's one thing that Baha'u'llah says. The power of falsehood has no power. It doesn't exist. So now a prophet foretells future events and this great day, and we should all be looking forward to that great day, lest it come upon us and we are unaware. My next question is, how does a prophet know that these future events will occur? And again, this is a simple question, because God speaks through him. But more particularly, let's ask this question, get a little more into detail about it. How is it possible that these future events can be foretold? How is it possible? I often ask the question, how is it possible for anything to exist? It's not humanly possible. We didn't do it. Again, God did it, and is it too much to say thank you, God, for creating existence? And this answer to this question depends on your perspective on human existence. If you believe that when God created man, he created the human race, then your perspective on human existence is based on physical realities. But if your perspective on human existence is that when God created man, he created the spirit of man, and as such, the human spirit is a divine gift and sacred, a sacred entity to be respected and protected as such. And the human race, let's run this out again. God creates the human spirit. The human race is the outward appearance, the outward manifestation of the powers and virtues of the human spirit, so that all of humanity devolves from this common origin that God created in his own image, which is the human spirit, the thing that animates the human frame, your heart, your mind, the love of your heart, and the depth of your thinking, and the broadness of your vision is a divine gift from God and the cause of our being. So that the human race, really, when it's fighting with each other, is trying to kill the human spirit, this God-given divine entity and sacred entity. So let's move on then. Or let's go back to how is it possible that these future events can be foretold? If your perspective is that when God created the spirit, this is the true reality of humanity, then the realm of the spirit has no time. So the reason why these events can be foretold is because they have already occurred. And they keep occurring. And we can wake up to this reality, or we can continue the way we're doing. God always says, you don't have to follow me if you don't want to. If you have something better, God himself, you're welcome. I often say I'm a kind of person, I take no prisoners, but it's not like I have a gun. I take no prisoners because I don't want anybody who doesn't come voluntarily. Can you imagine? Things we're doing today, we have to voluntarily abandon. No one's going to force you to change your behavior. Isn't that nice? Okay, now before we get to the timeline, I have a few warnings from Jesus himself about the time when he returns. Many people have said, quoted this verse that says, "Watch therefore, for you know not what hour your Lord doth come." Now this really is like, I'm going to give you a test, but I'm not going to tell you when it's going to happen. And you just, it's going to be a pop quiz. So you always have to be prepared. Now some people say, you know not what hour your Lord doth come, and they turn it around and say, well, then we'll never know, which is kind of strange. I'm not sure if it's helpful, let's say. This verse after it says, but know this. Okay, now this is getting a little like a warning. But know this is like, hey, listen up, pal. Okay, God is not really happy with it. Okay, it's starting out with a little tone that, okay, I've told you about this before, you didn't listen before. I'm going to tell you again anyway. That it's the good man of the house. Now the house here is the house of the Lord, the Christian church. And the good man of the house is the Christian leaders, the priests, and the like. If the good man of the house had known in what watch, and here notice how it starts out talking, the first command is to watch, to always be alert, keep your eyes open. And now he's using watch as a, in the first verse, watch is a verb, and here it is a noun. That if the good man of the house had known in what watch or what generation the thief would come. Okay, the passage before is talking about the Lord coming, and now he's referred to as a thief. This is not a good premonition. This means people will treat him like a thief. And they say, oh, a thief does not announce his coming. And yet Jesus announced his coming. So there's this little cross purposes going on here. Do you want your Lord to come or not? Are you looking? Are you ready to, if you hear the signs that your Lord has returned, will you look into it? Will you see the fruits? Look for the fruits, or will you just say, oh, the thief doesn't announce it's coming, it's not going to happen? You have to be careful that you don't fall off and stop looking, because the warning is, I'll highlight it with here. If the good man of the house had known, and above it says, you don't know, but if he had known at what hour the thief would come, what would he have done? He would have watched. So it's kind of a lazy good man of the house. He doesn't want to watch if he's not told. And he would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Is there any house more broken up? I'm sorry to say, than the Christian church. There are over 40,000 different divisions. And I won't say any more than that. Each one saying they're the correct one. And then Matthew goes on, Jesus goes on to say, therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. And so now I have another simple question. Do you think not? Are you ready to hear the glad tidings that your Lord has returned as promised? If you think not, Jesus says, for in such an hour as you think not, the Son of Man has come. Well, I'll give you some time to think about that one. Now, if you notice, I have a little key down here at the bottom. I have prophecies that I've found in the book of Leviticus, Daniel, Revelation, and one from the Quran that we'll get to. Boy, we're never getting to this timeline, are we? I have a few more warnings from Matthew in the same chapter. Now he goes on to say, but, and if that evil servant, he's gone from the good man of the house to the evil servant, shall say in his heart, in his evil heart, because a good tree has a good fruit. A bad tree can only produce bad fruit. Evil servant could only have a bad, evil heart. My Lord delayeth his coming. He doesn't want him to come. Why wouldn't he want him to come? Give up all he's got, his fame, his power, his position, his wealth, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants. I like the term smite. It's it means to strike hard. Fellow servants that belong to a different church, whatever, and to eat and drink with the drunken, to be drunk on their own ego. This is again a warning. So it's not going to be easy when the day of the Lord comes, because you'll be faced with people that don't want you to find him, like they did before. Like the Romans, they didn't want anybody following Jesus. The Lord of that evil servant shall come on a day when he looketh not for him, because he's not looking for him, in an hour that he is not aware of. And even if he was aware, he would say he would deny it. 2 Timothy. Timothy says, he's talking about when the Lord Jesus Christ, at his appearing, meaning in the future, in the kingdom of God on earth, that it's okay to reprove and rebuke. So this is my excuse for reproving and rebuking you. Don't take it out on me. I'm just reading the Bible. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lusts shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, whatever they want to hear. But the warning is, when Christ returns, that his own followers, his own church, will look for unsound doctrine. So, what's the first evidence? Let's go back. But of that day and hour, no man knoweth. And I hear this a lot. Know not the angels which are in heaven, neither the Son, but the Father. Okay, so let's parse this out. Let's analyze this closely before we overlook the obvious. Because once we overlook the obvious, we have chosen the path of error, and there's no way that the path of error can lead to truth. So that day and hour no man knows, neither the Son. I wonder why the Son wouldn't know. Maybe he's being born that day. What do people say this means? They say, because we do not know the day and the hour, we will never know when Christ will return. And I've heard this time and time again. And I say, well, if I told you Christ had returned, would you look into it? And they say, yes. And I say, well, Christ has returned. And they say, no, it's not true. So I get the impression I'm using the wrong presentation because they deny him so quickly. So they say, because we don't know the day and hour, we will never know when Christ will return. Interesting. So I have another simple question. Was the day and hour of Christ's first appearance foretold? Think about that for a minute. Now this one has three possible answers. There's yes, there's no, and there's, excuse me, would you repeat that again? Meaning, what was it? I don't think it was. I have not found where the day and the hour of Christ's first appearance was foretold. However, I have found prophecy that foretells the year that Christ will appear. My point being, we don't need to know the day and the hour. We can know the year. So now we get to the time prophecy timeline. Okay, we're going to start with, because we measure our years and according to the sun, I put solar years at the top. Let's start with the birth of Christ in the year 1. There's no year 0. And Jesus, we all agree, was crucified. He was 33 years old when he was crucified. A horrible thing to do to God's messenger. And they cut the head of John the Baptist as well. They seem to overlook that one too. The Romans did. There's a prophecy from Daniel that he speaks of the coming of the Messiah, the Prince. Okay? And it's called the 70-week prophecy. It's in chapter 9 and starts with verse 24. So let's go right to it. Daniel says 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city. Now thy people, Daniel is an Israelite. He's a descendant of the Israelites. At the time when the Israelite kingdom had fallen apart. Not quite completed yet, but it was really starting to go. So upon thy people means the Israelites, and upon thy holy city is Jerusalem, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins. So I don't think we've seen any of this ever. To make reconciliation for iniquity and bring in everlasting righteousness. I mean, if this ever happens, I'm looking forward to that day. And to seal up the vision and the prophecy. So that means when this vision comes, when this appointed one comes, to anoint the most holy, when the anointed one comes, the prophecy will be sealed up again, and there will be a second coming. Christ is from the Greek Christos, and Christos is the Greek translation of the Hebrew word Messiah. Messiah means covered in oil or anointed. We don't do these days, we don't anoint people anymore. So we have to really look back to ancient times to see how this had great meaning back then. If you were anointed with oil, I don't know, I wasn't there at the time, but it's a great thing. So therefore, Christ actually means the anointed one. So Daniel says 70 weeks are determined on thy people, 70 weeks unto the anointed one, the most holy. And then in the next verse he says, know therefore and understand. Now this is a little bit better than pay attention, pal. This is know and understand. There are two commands here. You can know things, but you don't know what you're talking about. So you have to understand what's being said as well. You need to read more into these prophecies, the words of God, so that you can understand the message that God is bringing to us. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Now let's stop here for a second and analyze this. The going forth of the edict to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Now, this is what's called the starting point, okay? And if we can determine when this starting point is, and then add 70 weeks to it, however long that is, we can determine when Christ appeared. Now, Daniel appeared. When did Daniel appear? Anybody? Show of hands. Daniel appeared around the year 600 BC. Now, Moses appeared 1,500 years before Christ. Then there was Israelite kingdom. And then I don't know what happened after Solomon. There was some sort of disunity. And then everything started to fall apart. And then Daniel appears in 600 BC. When the Israelite kingdom was really starting to fall apart. And he's saying there's going to be, in the future, there's going to be an edict to rebuild Jerusalem and to restore Jewish political authority. Not just to rebuild Jerusalem, but to rebuild and restore the Jews to their position. From that starting point unto the Messiah, the Prince. Now note here, Daniel says he's not only the anointed one, he's the prince. He's going to have two stations. He's going to have a dual station. One is the divine station of divinity of the Messiah, bringing the message of God. And the second is that of the prince. Now the prince stands in relation to the king as the son does to his father. And there are so many prophecies that talk about God the Father coming to walk among us, the mighty God, the everlasting Father. And so the prince is coming first because we must know the Son before we can know the Father. And won't it be a great day when the Father and the Son have appeared together as God has promised us would happen? I'm inclined to say yes, that will be a great day. I'm looking forward to it when everybody wakes up and says, that great day has come. So unto Messiah the Prince, this is called the resolution. So we have the starting point of the edict to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, and the resolution is at the appearance of the Messiah. And he says that'll be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So it's like in stages. 7 weeks will be the rebuilding and restoring. And then there'll be a period of 62 weeks, which is 62 weeks, which adds up to 69. And then the appearance of the Messiah will occur. And he goes on to say, and he, meaning the Messiah, shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. 1 week is 7 days. And in the middle of the week, which would be 3.5 days, right? He shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. Now, I don't know what oblation is, and that'll be your first assignment, is that you can go out and research what oblation means. Now, the ministry of Jesus was, in fact, from 27 to 34 AD, and it lasted 7 years. So this is our first indication that 1 week is 7 years, and that 1 day is 1 year. And it's our first introduction to this middle of the week 3.5 sequence, 3.5 years, 3.5 days sequence of time prophecies that we're going to be seeing more of. So let's go again. Let's recap. We have 70 weeks is 490 days. That's just by, you don't need a slide rule for that. There was an edict of the Persian king Artaxerxes. And the Persia and the Israelites and the Jews had a great relationship for thousands of years, for hundreds of years, due in part to the role that Esther played. There was a Persian king Artaxerxes. I love that name, Xerxes, and his son Artaxerxes, in 457 BC, that said it's time to rebuild the temple and to restore Jewish political authority. So let's add this up. 457 plus 457 BC plus 490 resolved in the year 34 AD. So this is our second indication that each day is a year. And our third indication is that I'm not making this up. I didn't put this together. I found this from, thank God, Abdu'l-Baha has explained this in a book that called Some Answered Questions, where one of the early believers went to meet with Abdu'l-Baha while he was in prison, near the end of his prison sentence, and asked him some questions, and he gave some answers. And one of them was about this particular prophecy of Daniel. Now, I don't say Abdu'l-Baha interpreted this. It's not his interpretation. It's not his understanding. It's his explanation. It is the word of God. It is the truth. And here's what he says. He says, the book of Daniel fixes the period between the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the martyrdom of Christ at 70 weeks. For it is through the martyrdom of Christ that the sacrifices ended and the altar destroyed. Okay, that's the oblation that ends. So you don't have to go look that up. The altar was destroyed. This prophecy thus refers to the advent of Christ. Now, these 70 weeks begin with the restoration and rebuilding of Jerusalem, concerning which 4 edicts were issued by 3 kings. And he lists the first, the second, and the third one is issued by Artaxerxes in the 7th year of his reign, that is in 457 BC. And this is recorded in the 7th chapter of Ezra. And you can go and look these up for yourself. The other 3 edicts just said, let's rebuild the temple. This one said, rebuild the temple and give the Judeans, as they were called back then, authority. What Daniel intended, Abdu'l-Baha continues, is the 3rd edict issued in 457 BC. 70 weeks makes 490 days, like I just showed you on the preceding slide. Each day, according to the text of the Bible, is 1 year. For in the Torah, it is said, the day of the Lord is 1 year. Therefore, 490 days is 490 years. The 3rd edict of Artaxerxes was issued 457 years, 457 years before the birth of Christ. Christ was 33 years old at the time of his martyrdom and ascension. 33 added to 457 to 490, which is the time announced by Daniel for the advent of Christ. Isn't that wonderful? The appearance of Christ is foretold 600 years before he appeared in a time prophecy by Daniel the prophet. And isn't that wonderful? But the year, the day and the hour were not foretold. But the year and the indication that there would be two, in the middle of the week, because John the Baptist appeared first, and then Jesus announced his mission in the middle of that 7-year period. Isn't that wonderful? This is how much God thinks of us. He doesn't leave us out in the dark and say, it's not going to happen. He says it is going to happen. And it did happen. Let's review. What do the people say? They say, because we don't know the day and the hour, we will never know when Christ will return. But we didn't know the day and hour of Christ's first appearance. And he did appear. And we could figure it out. Of course, we're like 2,000 years after Daniel, 2,600 years later. But that's the benefit of hindsight. Now, when Jesus appeared, he said, when ye shall therefore see, meaning in the future, when ye shall therefore see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. So again, this prophecy of Daniel is very important. It's critical to the return of Jesus as well. Daniel has another prophecy, and Jesus refers to it saying, meaning that Jesus did not fulfill this, this will become at a future date. So we can use the same starting point. Remember, we have a starting point and a resolution. This is the 2,300 days prophecy. Let's go back to Matthew. I've got to tell you about this. This is where Jesus is quoted in Matthew. Jesus says, the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then the end shall come. Now, this is where Christians have been very, very dutiful, loyal, and devoted to the teachings of Christ. They went all over the earth to spread the gospel, and they had completed this task. Does anybody know when? The gospel was preached to every country in the world in the year 1844. This was achieved in 1844. And Jesus promises that the end shall come. Now, all he says is the end. He doesn't say that everyone will die, that the planet will explode. He says that the end shall come. Now, every day comes to an end, and we have another day that follows. So every end has a new beginning. We shall therefore see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place. And again, here, this time he's being polite. He says, whoso readeth, let him understand. So again, read not just the literal words, the letters, but understand. No one recognized Christ the first time. They're not going to recognize him again. It takes understanding to look underneath, to see the truth, the reality beyond physical appearance. Now notice how he says, stand in the holy place. This can be used as a command. Now, he's saying when you see the abomination of desolation, go and stand in that holy place where Daniel gave that prophecy. Daniel lived the later years of his life in what's called the land of Elam, which is an area of Western Persia that encompasses the city of Shiraz. And Shiraz is a city where the Bab made his declaration in 1844. So Jesus is saying he did not fulfill this time prophecy of Daniel, and we can then deduce that the start date is the same as the one that Daniel gave for the coming of Jesus. Why else would Jesus speak of it? Now, again, I'm not just saying this. I'm not someone to go out on a limb and say, I know this to be the truth, because I'm saying it again, thankfully. Abdu'l-Baha has explained to us again in some answered questions the following. He says, in this answer, in verse 15, he referred them to the 8th chapter of the book of Daniel. saying everyone who reads it will understand. And I'm hoping when you read it, you will understand it too. That it is the time that is spoken of. And then Abdu'l-Bahá says, consider how clearly, see how clearly the manifestation of the Bab is spoken of in the Old Testament and in the Gospel. See how clearly. Let's see how clear it is. Well, here's Daniel. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake. I love that old English. How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice? The transgression of desolation, he called it transgression. To give both the sanctuary, meaning Jerusalem, and the host, meaning Israel, to be trodden underfoot. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Okay, so let's take this time prophecy, 2,300 years, and let's drop it on our timeline. Here it comes, there it is. Where does it resolve? From 457 BC, resolves at 1844 AD when the Baha'i Faith begins. What a coincidence. And the declaration of the Bab on May 23rd, 1844. How do you like that? This is, again, Daniel has many time prophecies. And what a coincidence that this should happen at the same time. That we could come up with this resolution. Everybody else is welcome to come up with their own, but this is the one that I'm willing to accept. Just happens to coincide with the declarations of Bab, and on May 23rd, 1844. And so, should we move on? Are we ready to move on? I noticed that this bracket here is missing something. Did anything else happen on May 23rd, 1844?
So if anyone has questions, you're more than welcome to ask. We have the chat box. You can write your questions down below on the GoToMeeting control panel. So feel free to ask your questions and we will be answering them.
So, did anything else happen on May 23rd, 1844? And something else did, as a matter of fact. That's the day that Abdu'l-Bahá was born. Abdu'l-Bahá is the son of Baha'u'llah. Why is it significant that Abdu'l-Bahá should be born on the same day as the promised Christ announces his declaration, announces his return? When the Bab said, declared to his first believers that he was the gate to God and that a new day had dawned on mankind, the day of fulfillment, no longer the day of prophecy, but the day of fulfillment. And one particular reason I've come up with, that the reason why Abdu'l-Bahá is again a title. Abdul means servant, and Baha, as in Baha'u'llah, means glory. So Abdu'l-Bahā's station and his title is the glorious servant. His whole purpose in life was to be of service to all mankind and to advance the human race according to the teachings of his beloved father, Baha'u'llah, and to spread the teachings of Baha'u'llah. When Abdu'l-Bahá was born, Baha'u'llah became the father. So what a great coincidence that the Bab makes his declaration, Abdu'l-Bahá is born, the second advent of Christ occurs, and the father literally becomes the father on the same day at the same time. Maybe that's why the son didn't know, because he hadn't been born yet, or was being born at the same time, if you look underneath it. Isaiah has said in his famous verse, chapter 9, verse 6, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given." And the Christians have taken this to mean that this is Jesus. But Jesus was not the mighty God, the everlasting Father. He was the Son. So Jesus partially fulfilled this prophecy of Isaiah. But the son who is born, the child who is born, is Abdul Baha. And look at this. The son who is given as a sacrifice, because Abdul Baha was given as a gift. You know, a gift is something you get because it's unearned and undeserved. And you should be appreciative of it. The Bab was given like Christ as a sacrifice. He too was suspended in the air and martyred, this time by a firing squad of 750 soldiers. So when Christ returned, he was treated the same way that it was treated the first time, after a short ministry, no less. So, all right, we still got a few minutes left. Did anything else happen in 1844? There was something else that happened on the first day of spring in 1844, and it was that the Jews were allowed to return to the Holy Land for the first time in thousands of years, since 70 AD. The Sultan of Turkey was forced to sign the Edict of Toleration by several Western leaders and a Jewish leader who had organized the whole thing. And it allowed, so what that meant was, now you have to remember, the Israelite kingdom fell apart after God warned the Israelites what to do and what not to do. He told them what to do, and he warned them, if you don't do it, there'll be a great punishment. For a long period of time. And so, the Edict of Toleration was a signal that the punishment of Israel had ended. So this is 1844 again. A lot of people, they didn't get the memo, okay? But that prophecy was actually in Leviticus. So there's Genesis, Exodus, and the third book of the Torah, in the book of Leviticus, chapter 26, God is saying to Israel, if you follow my commandments, you will be prosperous. I will walk over your enemies. One will chase 1,000, 10 will chase 10,000. And won't that be great? But, and then the warning comes. It's called the 7 times prophecy, where Israel will be punished if they don't listen to God. So let's look at this briefly, because we're getting close to the hour mark. The warning is, if you do not hearken unto me and will despise my statutes and abhor my judgments, this is really bad way to act. You know, that God gave them so much, took them out of slavery and gave them the Israelite kingdom. Break my covenant, nothing worse than that. God warns, I will do this unto you. I will point over you terror, consumption, which is like TB, I don't know, the burning ague that shall consume the eyes, cause sorrow of the heart. Your enemies shall eat your food. I will set my face against you. God sets his face against you. That's bad. And you shall be slain before your enemies. And they that hate you shall reign over you. And you shall flee when none pursue you. And he repeats this 4 times. And if ye will not yet for all this hearken unto me, then I will punish you 7 times more for your sins. Now this is the introduction of a time. And we need to figure out what a time is. But it's a long time. It's not just 1 occasion, 2 occasions, a time. We'll get to that in a minute. And then this warning is repeated 4 times, just in case they weren't listening the first time. And each warning predicts just a dire atrocities to be committed against the Israelites. But God says, if they shall confess their iniquity, then I will remember my covenant with Jacob and Isaac and Abraham, and I will remember the land, meaning Israel. And they'll return to the land. And yet for all that, when they be in the land of their enemies, I will not cast them away. That's the promise. And no matter how dire the persecution the Jews suffer, God will not cast them out. He will not abhor them, neither will he destroy them utterly. Now, there are some religious leaders in the Middle East that want to destroy Israel utterly, even though it says in the Bible that will not happen. So they've taken the wrong side. In Iran, especially, you hear them say they want to wipe them off the face of the map, which is not even a good translation. Either you wipe them off the face of the earth, or you wipe them off the map. But in any event, in the Quran, there's a big promise that to Israel, the children of Israel, that the day will soon come when they will serve the Lord with all their might and with the glorious station. I think it would read their own book. So the promise is they'll be prosperous. If they don't heed the warning, there'll be punishment for a very long period of time, and then there'll be God's reconciliation. So how long is 7 times? Bible scholars and Jewish scholars agree that a time is what's called a prophetic year, where each year has 12 months and each month has 30 days. So that's 360 days in one time. Now, as Abdul-Baha has reminded us, Day of the Lord is 1 year. So 1 time is 360 years, and 7 times is 2,520 years that the Israelites will be punished, and before they can be brought back to the Holy Land. And in fact, they've been brought back to the Holy Land. So it's more obvious now that the punishment of Israel has ended and that people need to get the memo. So all we need is the starting time. And we know the Edict of Toleration was signed in 1844. So let's start there and work our way backwards. So we start with the resolution and look for the starting time. So 7 times, here comes the line, goes back to 677 BC, which is before Daniel. So anybody here old enough to know what happened in 677 BC? Anybody? Show of hands. I don't think we're that old. What happened in 677 is called the sin of King Manasseh. And King Manasseh was a Judean king, son of Hezekiah. He was known for the slaughter of innocents, which is bad, which means outside the temple and inside the temple, they're cutting people's throats. You know, they're doing other things too, killing people and raping women. Stone idols in the temple, crying out loud. The second commandment is no graven images. And he authorized treatises criticizing the Torah. As religious violations goes, this is bad. This is enough to get started. He, of course, lost his power. He was taken captive in the year 677, in the 22nd year of his kingdom, by somebody named Esar-Haddon, and who returned him as a puppet ruler. But from that point on, it was the beginning of the end of the Israelite kingdom. They had already split up. There was northern Israel, and there was Judea. And Jeremiah, he appeared 626 BC. So 50 years later, Jeremiah is saying, by the way, God says, I will cause them to be removed into all kingdoms of the earth because of Manasseh, the son of Hezekiah, king of Judah, for that which he did in Jerusalem. So this is the warning, and this is, okay, it's happened. So the day is dawned that the Israelite kingdom is going to fall apart. And the only ones left, the remnant of Israel, are the Jews. And they have the strength of duration to endure everything that happened because of something they didn't do, really. So we're approaching the 12 o'clock, the 1 hour point. I'm hardly halfway through here. I will show you the final chart just to see how many time prophecies there are. And then we can go to questions if you want.
So I think it's good to finish up the prophecy that we're working with right now. So we can go past the hour for this prophecy, but we do have some questions as well.
Okay.
So one question asked, which I understand is a pretty tough question in modern day. It's, how do we reconcile the suffering of the Palestinians today and the creation of Israel with the state that we have now within the prophecy?
Now, the Philistines, if you study the history of the Israelite kingdom, their enemies were the Philistines. In the days of Jesus, the land was called Judea. They were the Jews were the remnants of the Israelite kingdom. They took it upon themselves to try to reestablish the Israelite kingdom. It didn't work. The Romans defeated them, and they were kicked out of the Holy Land, kicked out of Israel and Judea. And 100 years later, the Holy Land was branded with the name of Palestine as an affront to the Jews. So, again, you'd think people would be happy that God keeps his promises. And for some reason, the Muslim leadership has been annoyed that such a thing could happen on their watch. And nowhere in the Quran is Palestine mentioned. So, and again, the Philistines are the enemies of God. Why would you link yourself with, with that title? The history of Islam is, it's going to take a lot of time to go into it, but Islam was beset with violence among themselves. And the Prophet Muhammad himself, if you ask Muslims how Muhammad died, you get several different responses. But he didn't just die. He was poisoned. And the Imams, and he pointed to his son-in-law Ali and said, if you turn to Ali, you turn to Muhammad. So all of these Imams were murdered as well. And the ones who lived in Palestine were the ones who rebelled against the Imams. Now, this is, okay, make a lot of people upset, all right? But you need to keep a clear head on this. And remember, what is your purpose in life? Is it to continue doing what you've always done when the promised one comes? Like when Jesus appeared, the Romans they didn't change anything. And they eventually lost their kingdom. Or is it to look into, if they stopped fighting Israel, what a wonderful place, and said, great, we welcome you here because God says so. I mean, think of what sort of effect this would have on the hearts of the people. A lot of people are angry, but it's time to stop. God wants us to live in peace with unity. You can't spell unity without you and I, can you? So I anticipated this question. But again, the question is, what are you looking for? Now, if you don't want to see the promised one, according to these declarations, you don't have to. Like I say, we don't take prisoners. We don't take people against their will. You are welcome to continue what you're doing. But if you want to look into this and not make an issue, to drive a point, to drive a wedge between everybody and say, let's keep fighting, we won't have unity if we keep fighting. So at some point, we have to stand back and abandon everything that we're doing, everything we've held on to, everything we've been told by our parents, everything we've been told by our government and our religious leaders. It is time to abandon it on our own, of our own free will, and look into these teachings of Baha'u'llah, the Bab into Baha'u'llah, Father and the Son, Baha'u'llah appointed his son in his will. So it is written. As the story goes about Muhammad, he called out for a pen. And somebody rebelled and said, the book of God sufficeth. Didn't want him to write a will. No one can thwart the will of God. So it wasn't his intention to write a will. It wasn't Muhammad's intention to write a will, but he did expose someone, a traitor. So, okay, this happened a long time ago. If we're going to come to a new understanding, again, I'm not going to force you. You are welcome to look into this. You're welcome to turn away and continue in the way you are. I appreciate your concern. I'm sorry that I'm not going to take sides. I hope I didn't take sides. But I think, the great promise that the Israelite kingdom will return is something to be happy about. And the warnings are that people will not want you to do that. They don't want you to be happy. Who are the ones saying, let's keep the same system? I mean, we've been fighting wars for thousands of years, and they keep fighting.
So we got a question from Maria and Alex, and they are asking, why does God speak in prophecies anyway? Why not just tell us when the future events will unfold in easy to understand language?
If you've ever been to school and you took a test and you got a C or a D on it, you're like, why is that test so hard? I mean, it's just nuclear physics. Why don't they make it easier? Rocket science. Because there are a number of reasons. I don't know them all. It's God's method. He makes it difficult and easy at the same time. It's difficult if you cling to old ways and don't listen to the messengers. And it's easy if you do listen to them. But then people will challenge your acceptance and your belief. There's a verse in the Baha'i writings, quoting the Quran, that says, do men think when they say we believe they shall be let alone and not be put to proof? So that the meaning, the clear meaning, is that if you say you believe, God will say, well, then prove it. Are you attached to the physical things of this world so much that if you lost them all, you'd think you'd lost your life? You're right, though. Why does he do this? It's to help us grow. We're not going to live in this world forever. Child in the womb thinks this is a great universe, has no idea there's a huge universe outside of it, and then it has to leave that great place of comfort and come into this world crying and not knowing what it's doing. It has to learn a whole new lifestyle of things. So if it was easy, we would have all done it by now. Some people want it to be easy. They say, oh, we're going to be taken up in the air in a rapture. The word rapture is not in the Bible anywhere. So, I mean, it sounds like, oh, it'll be so obvious. Who could deny it? They've never done it before. They've always shown us that it's difficult. What do you think, my dear friend? I mean, he did sort of spell it out. Daniel spelled out these time prophecies. Look at it. They all line up at 1844. And there's a few extras, one for Baha'u'llah. But they all line up at 1844. Look at that. He's made it pretty obvious. Daniel did it, and then Jesus did it in the book of Revelation.
So, Mr. Villa, if you can we go to the Quran prophecy and do that one in its entirety during this presentation?
Yes.
Thank you.
Again, that one's not pretty, okay, because Jesus said, I'll send my two witnesses. And I don't know how to get back. Okay, there we go. He says, I'll send my 2 witnesses. They will prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth, and then the beast shall overcome them and kill them. And before that, he says, and fire will proceed out of their mouth, and if any man should harm them, he shall in that way be put to death. Jesus hung on the cross and said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do.
So one way to go to that slide would be to get out of the presentation, click on the slide, and then once more press on the presentation tab. That's one quick way to get there.
Yeah, if I knew what I was doing. I need to get to the right slide.
I understand that.
Okay.
So what part of the Bible refers to this quote that you just mentioned?
That's from chapter 11 of the book of Revelation.
Okay, so the book of Revelations, chapter 11.
Yeah. Okay. And it has to do with also with
Is this a slide that it starts on in your presentation?
actually, I'm looking for the, here we go. Okay.
Okay, great.
This has to do with the number of the beast. Everyone says the mark of the beast is 666. But in the year 666, that was when the Muhammad and Ali had both been murdered. And the Umayyads, according to Abdul Baha in his explanation, the Caliph overthrew Islam. Now, this is going to upset a lot of people. I hate to say, but it's a fact of life that Islam was divided from the beginning. Muhammad even said, there are some who have built a mosque for mischief, for infidelity, and to disunite the faithful, and in expectation of him who in time past warred against God and his apostles. So even his own followers, he's saying, have violated the covenant and taken the wrong side. Jesus said they would be overthrown by the year 666. Everyone calls it the mark of the beast. It's not the mark of the beast, which is a different subject. In the Quran, it is said, the day whose night is 1,000 years. Now, the 12th Imam was called the hidden Imam. He was the only one who didn't get murdered. He went into hiding. And he appeared in the year 260 of the Mohammedan calendar. So 1,000 years plus 260 resolves at 1260 of the Hijra, which is the same as 1844 AD. And here's that verse from the Quran, the chapter 32, the adoration. He says, God it is who hath created the heavens and the earth and all that is between them in 6 days, then ascended his throne. Save him, you have no patron and none to plead for you. Will he not then reflect? From the heaven to the earth, he governeth all things. Hereafter shall they come upon him, shall they come up to him, attain the presence of God, on a day whose length shall be 1,000 years. And then at verse 10 it says, and they say, what? And we shall have lain hid in the earth, shall we become a new creation? Again, they focus on the physical realities of life. And God says, yea, they deny that they shall attain the presence of their Lord, the Lord God. So this is, let's go back, the day whose length is 1,000 years, okay? And there it's pretty clear from the Quran that that's when it's going to happen. And that people still say, they don't believe it. Why don't they believe? So again, this is a very difficult subject to approach because it means walking away from quite a lot. Now, the Quran is the book of God. I'm not saying what you think. I'm saying to walk away from what you have been told, if you want to. If you don't want to, I'm not going to argue with it. There's so much, now the Prophet Muhammad, they always talk about the Prophet Muhammad, he's the final prophet. No prophet shall come after him. But he's a prophet, right? Like Jesus was a prophet, and Daniel was the prophet, and they foretold future events, like the coming of a great day and the coming of the Father. And Muhammad is a prophet. So he foretold future events too, right? What future events did he foretell? He called it attaining the presence of their Lord. He called it attaining the divine presence. He said, he denied being the Father in that verse where he said he was the last prophet. And Baha'u'llah is not a prophet. He didn't come to foretell his own coming. He fulfilled the prophecies of the ancient prophets, including Muhammad. Muhammad was the last prophet to foretell the coming of Baha'u'llah. You can look at it that way. Muhammad said, Muhammad is not the father of any man among you. But he said, Muhammad is not the father. He had no son. No son to follow him. His successor was his cousin and his son-in-law, married to his daughter. So all these things, they are interconnected. And they can be shown if you want to see it. Now, if you don't want to see it, if you've been told too much, you're welcome to continue in the pathway you are. And I'm sorry that I, woke you up so abruptly. But we're running out of time here, friends. The world is in great peril, and one day you will look back on this and say, thank God somebody woke me up. But it's not enough, just to say, oh, let's do what he says. You have to investigate this yourself. This is why Baha'u'llah says the investigation of truth, independent investigation of truth, is one of the essential teachings of the Baha'i Faith. Don't take somebody's word for it.
So the question going forward, if you have the screen with the prophecy timeline, the question is, where is it that you had the quote that you just mentioned now? So where would one find that to see with their own eyes? The quote that you just mentioned.
From the Quran?
In the Bible. About
okay. What quote?
About Revelations 13.
Well, Revelation 13 has to deal with the beast, and it talks about how the beast shall cause people to have a mark on their forehead, or on their hand.
Yeah, can you describe that?
And you ask, yeah, hold on.
Thank you.
Okay. What is the mark of the beast? What happened there? Okay. What is the mark of the beast? Everyone says it's 666. And I've asked them to show me where it says that. Now this Revelation 13 begins talking about, I stood on the sand and saw a beast. The dragon gave him his power. It's a bad image. One of his heads wounded to death. His deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Abdu'l-Baha explains again, Daniel referred to a beast with 10 horns, and Jesus refers to it as the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. So he's a bit more descriptive than Daniel, but they're talking about the same thing, obviously. Abdu'l-Baha explains that this is the Umayyads that overthrew Islam, and then in chapter 11, this is where Jesus says, I'll give power to my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth, meaning not wearing white raiment, like the great Michael, the great prince. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth, and he must in this manner be killed. Now this is what Muhammad did. He fought back. And he took his followers and overcame a massive enemy. And it was the will of God. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them. This is bad. And shall overcome them and kill them. And that's what happened. At the same time that Imam Ali was murdered, there was also an attempt on the life of Muawiyah, who was the rebel leader who was fighting with Ali and wouldn't accept Ali. There were assassins that went after Ali, Muawiyah, and somebody else named Amru. They killed the wrong guy when they went to Amru. They killed Ali. And Muawiyah was struck in the head with a sword and recovered. Now remember, I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And the world wondered after the beast. And then they followed him. So then we talk about the mark of the beast in chapter 13. What is the mark of the beast? So many people say, Christian leaders say it's the number 666, that the beast will have on his head or on his right hand. And that until this fantastic thing occurs, then the beast hasn't appeared, and therefore they get to stay as the leaders of the church forever. And isn't that special, as the church lady would say? So if we, again, this is about this unsound doctrine. This is what Revelation chapter 13, starting at 16 says, and he causes all, those small and great, to receive a mark. So if the beast doesn't have the mark, okay? And that no man might buy or sell, save that he had the mark. There were people actually in the Caliphate empire who were given a mark on their hand with the name of the beast, which means princes, or descendants, or the number of his name, which I don't know what that means. I remember, and Luke said, take heed, don't be deceived, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ. And so these people that are saying the mark of the beast is 666, they do it in the name of Christ. And Christ has warned against them. So the first lie is the beast won't have the mark on his forehead or on his hand. It'll be the subject. So that is like, how do you just misread that? You know, and then mislead your followers. And the second lie is that the mark is not defined. Okay? It's simply not defined. It says there will be a mark, but not what it is. Now, what it does say, no man may buy or sell that he has the mark, some kind of tattoo, name of the beast, where the princes or descendants or the stamp of the caliph with the number of his name. So 666 comes from, here's wisdom. If you have understanding, count the number of the beast. So it's not the mark of the beast. It's the number of the beast. It's 666. And we're told to count. What do we count if not our time? So this is a time prophecy that the number of the beast is the year 666 AD. So what had happened by that time? Had two witnesses appeared, said they were, and witnesses testified to the truth. They also, Muhammad testified to the truth of the mission of Jesus. So he was a witness to Jesus. Bahá'í explained that. I'm not just coming up with that. And by the year 666, these two witnesses had been killed. So there we have it. Was there another question?
So I'm not sure if this was a typo, but you had written the murder of Muhammad and the murder of Ali. Was that
Yeah, they're
Muhammad
both.
died of natural causes, or he died by murder?
I said, if you ask Muslims how the Prophet Muhammad died, you will get three different stories. You will hear that he died of old age. You will hear that I don't know how he died, and you'll hear that he was poisoned by one of his slave wives. So one doesn't get poisoned by accident or naturally. He was poisoned. So that's sadly, Jesus, he was crucified. The Christians walk around with the cross and say, and he was crucified. But Muslims, you don't really hear how the Prophet Muhammad died.
Wow. So,
and Jesus warned that the beast would overcome them and kill them, which means they're going to get murdered. And then that's what happened. So Ali was murdered. Muawiyah took over, and Hassan, the second, the eldest son of Ali, said, "Okay, go ahead, Muawiyah." And then Muawiyah inveigled the wife of Hassan to poison him. And then Muawiyah said, "Okay, no more imams and no more descendants of the Prophet Muhammad." But he established his dynasty and his descendants. I mean, there couldn't be a worse blasphemy that just gets, oh no, that's all right. It's like when the American colonists rebelled against the king, that sort of thing. And then they cut Imam Hussein's head off. And most of them imams were poisoned. So it's like I say, it's kind of a sordid history that no one talks about, but it's there to investigate. I mean, everything I've investigated, I've found, it's just my cursory investigation of this, but it's there to be found if you want to see it.
So this is again. I have a question for you. So you're saying the imamate, for those who are listening now, you're saying the imams throughout the line of the Shia Islam sect of Islam, the line of imams that were the ones who inherited the rule over the religion of Islam after Muhammad, they had all been killed?
The line of imams, yeah, except for the 12th imam. They were all killed. The first 11 imams, so Ali was the first imam, Hassan was the second, Hussein the third, and then if you look up the history, you'll see that most of them were poisoned, some of them by the Caliph himself, except for the 12th imam. I believe he was Imam Mahdi.
And if you are then as a Baha'i, you believe that the 12th imam is the Bab, and he under that context was killed too.
Yes.
So we want to know for all the people viewing this, where would you recommend further reading so that one can become themselves equipped with this same knowledge that you have through your own investigation learned?
I would start with some answered questions. Again, that's Abdul Baha explaining all different subjects with such clarity that no priest or religious leader or scholar could begin to compare with in such simple clarity. So I'd start with some answered questions. If you have time, the Dawnbreakers is the chronology of the early years of the ministry of the Bab, up into the first volume is from the two prophets that came before to foretell the coming of the Bab, and then up and through his declaration and his martyrdom. And Baha'u'llah's book is called the Book of Certitude, the first book that he revealed. In Arabic, it's called Kitab-i-Iman. And certitude is what we need. It's not enough to be, well, I'm almost convinced, but he calls it the Book of Certitude, to assure us that God keeps his promises. And if you want to investigate the truth on your own, this is what I would recommend. Kitab-i-Iman is not nearly as long as the Dawnbreakers. But I would suggest starting with Abdul-Baha because he's the son, and I said you must know the son before you can know the father. And then the Dawnbreakers is the history of the early days of the Bahá'í Faith.
Great, great. So a place to visit the prophecies that you've made. Besides what I'm going to share, is there somewhere that you have available or a way people can contact you so that they can learn more?
Yes, I have a Facebook page. I have an email address we can make available to people. My name is George Vaya, and I go by my wife's name, George Farideh Vaya, on Facebook. And georgevaya@hotmail.com is my email.
Great, great. So a way if you want to find out more through the Clearwater Baha'is, you can first and foremost go to www.clearwaterbaha'is.org, and we have resources on that website available where you can learn more about the Baha'i Faith. The reference Baha'i Library, which was sent through the chat, reference.baha'i.org, is a place where you can access books such as Some Answered Questions by Abdul-Baha and the Kitab-i-Iman in English, the Book of Certitude by Baha'u'llah. And further, beyond that, if you have more questions, and specifically from George Vaya, I'm sorry, George, everyone calls you Via, and then here I'm following suit, right? So if you
I could be wrong.
if you want to find from George Vaya more of this that you've just watched, we have uploaded about 6 of 7 parts of his talk that he's given in 7 parts on YouTube. So if you go to www.youtube.com/c/Clearwater Baha'is, you will find the channel for the Clearwater Baha'is on YouTube. Further, if you have more questions and you want to see other content, this channel has everything available to you to find just that. The videos for George Vaya are going to be found under the playlist Biblical Time Prophecies on the Clearwater Baha'is YouTube channel. Further, in addition to YouTube itself, we'll have some links for you available on the clearwaterbaha'is.org website. This 11 a.m. weekly session on GoToMeeting will again continue next week on May 7. Today's May 17, so May 24 plus 7 days. It's going to be at 11 a.m. with John Hatcher, and he's going to be speaking on a very interesting subject, something related to, again, we talked about prophecies. We talked about prophecies of the Baha'i Faith. Now we're thinking a little bit ahead. We're thinking about during this time that we live in now, this lesser piece and the pandemic and how they relate. So thank you, Mr. Vaya, for joining us. We really
Thank you for having me. This is the final page I have. You see the House of Justice is listed there, and Shoghi Effendi, our guardian, the beloved guardian, is a central figure of the Baha'i Faith as well. That's a different topic for a different date. All of these foretold in the Bible as well.
So we can't see that, what you're showing.
Oh, you can't see it? I thought I had the...
Only your presentation.
The screen's not up anymore?
We see your presentation, the Time Prophecy timeline. That's what we see.
with all the
Yes.
the charts.
Yep.
Okay. Up here is the House of Justice.
Oh, there we go. Yep.
Yeah. And Shoghi Effendi is our beloved guardian. They're both foretold in the Bible as well, and that's a different subject for a different time.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and all the friends out there watching. I hope I didn't push you too hard, but I'm not going to take anything back either.
Thank you very
You'll
much.
be fine. Loves you, dear.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Hold off,